I was simply trying to fix the culture in many ways.
I'm defenseless against that kind of female insanity. It produced an overwhelming sense of impending doom. The more aggressive, psychopathic boys, they simply don't care.
Competition would start kicking in.
All of a sudden, we can't talk about Neanderthal DNA anymore.
That's a fucking good point. You seem to be a bit of a glum bucket.
Thanks, guys. That's not what we're talking about.
What's almost-in-time inventory?
Almost-in-time inventory is the phrase we use to describe a whole selection of books that we offer. It's basically the things that are, below the 2,000th best-selling book up to the 400,000th best-selling book. Those are titles that we can get from a network of more than a dozen different wholesalers. So if a customer orders a book from us today, we order that book from our wholesalers today. That book shows up on our loading dock the next morning, and then we can ship it to the customer.
They say one of the toughest things to do on the internet is to capture mind share. What was your secret? How did you do that?
Yeah, even more generally, I agree with you that capturing mind share on the internet is extremely difficult. Even more generally, it's the late 20th century, not just the internet. Capturing attention. Attention is the scarce commodity of the late 20th century. And one of the ways that you can do that, and it's the way that we did it, was by doing something new and innovative for the first time that actually has real value for the customer. That's a hard thing to do, but if you do that, then newspapers will write about what you're doing, customers will tell other customers, and you'll get a huge word-of-mouth fan-out, and that can really drive and accelerate businesses, and that's what happened with us. In the first year of opening Amazon.com to the public, we didn't do any paid advertising, and all of our growth was fueled by word-of-mouth and media exposure.
I saw little ads at the bottom of the column of the New York Times.
That was our very first advertising. We don't do that anymore, but at the very beginning, we did little tiny ads at the bottom of the front page of the New York Times.
I thought that was very clever. It's sort of using a URL as a macro, because I read...
That it expands.
We're a bookstore, click here.
Right. That's a great way to think of it.
And it worked very well, apparently.
I don't know, the problem with that kind of advertising is it's extremely difficult to track.
Put a different URL for every...
That's the problem, is that you want people to start to learn your URL, so you don't want to actually use a different one. And it's very easy. One of the great things about online ads, we do advertising today in maybe 40 different, on different websites. We do banner ads. And that advertising is very easy to track in terms of knowing how effective it is. So we know for each piece of creative in each venue, not only how many click-throughs we get, but how many sell-throughs we get, how many dollars of revenue it generates per ad dollar spent on that creative in that venue. And that is sort of a marketer's, nirvana in a certain sense.
Welcome to the Michael Brooks Show. We're broadcasting live from Brooklyn, USA, where left is best. This is a special Friday show with super producer Matt Leck.
Hello.
Chief economist David Griscom.
How's it going?
Super producer David Slavic, roaming the digitosphere in the ever-expanding, ever-leftward, ever-global TMBS universe. On this program, joining us, Natalie Wynn, Contrapoints. We're talking about the Trump administration's assault on trans rights and how to own Ben Shapiro on pronouns. Then crew Corey Pein joins us to talk about the psychopaths, the horrific messes that run Amazon and Facebook, and why we need to hashtag nationalize Amazon and hashtag abolish Facebook. Plus, we have a Griscom Economic Minute, a gem, a shout out. Stacey Abrams is showing how it's done in the face of a stolen Georgia election. In the post game, we've got a little cold open that we're going to do, a little visit from our Pod Save America buddies in light of some new news on Pod Save America. Speaking of which, I feel I am looking very Pod Save America today. People watching can notice the innovative sartorial choice. Shouts to Nando Vila.
Looking Brookings over here. Michael
Indeed.
Brookings.
Michael Brookings. looking, you know why? Because these are sticking out. That's not Brookings. But all that, plus we've got to throw some shout outs to the birthday of Ronnie Casseroles. We've got plenty of other stuff to get to in the post game. It's going to be us, the fellas, plus your calls and Discord questions, and much, much more. This is the Michael Brooks Show. Let's get to it. Facebook has too much power. It's an unaccountable company. And thanks to Chuck Schumer and looking out for the interests of his daughter and campaign contributor, they will face even less scrutiny and accountability than the already meager ones that the Senate was attempting to begin with. And this is not just, of course, Facebook. Amazon is one of the world's most wealthy and powerful corporations. They're moving to Virginia and New York City with massive handouts from the government. Walmart has made a fortune by underpaying workers with the help of state and local governments, busting unions and destroying local competition. And too much of the federal government continues to provide a baseline for these companies, both in terms of rewards, packages, and corporate contributions from our general money and welfare, as well as to buffer them while they ruthlessly exploit their workforces and pay them poverty wages. This is a really important piece that the Bernie Sanders people just put out on their Instagram page on how workers fare who work for Amazon.
A lot of people are very interested in homelessness, including me.
One of the people that trained me when I came in, he's homeless.
I know people who live in their car. Who sleep outside the center. They sleep in their car. That to me is heartbreaking. After taxes, you take home $280 a week. $280 a week in Phoenix, Arizona is not enough money to survive on.
I'm going to identify and vet and fund family homeless shelters.
One person in particular, I know she worked hard. She worked extra hours wherever she could. She was living in her car, literally sleeping in her car.
I'm very proud of the wages that we pay.
He's making more in a minute than I'm probably going to make in my entire lifetime. There's no accountability for Jeff Bezos. He has the money and he sets the rules and he can do whatever he wants.
Amazon, of course, has received massive giveaways from New York and Virginia to locate in both outside the D.C. metropolitan area and in Long Island City in Queens to expand this global empire that ruthlessly underpays and abuses its workers. Walmart has survived because of a lax regulatory environment, ruthless union busting, a global supply chain which is detrimental to the environment, relies on global sweatshop labor, and also, just like Amazon, a workforce that is ruthlessly underpaid and abused by them and cushioned by meager government benefits, things like food stamps and housing and other programs for an impoverished workforce. Now, Facebook also in corporate wrongdoing and government looking the other way has been revealed to be playing both sides of sort of public misuses of anti-Semitism. It has lied and covered up its extensive vulnerability to fake news and propaganda. It's looked the other way on hate speech. It's aided and abetted the far right, and of course, beginning with Donald Trump. And it, too, through campaign contributions and political relationships with both parties, has shielded itself from scrutiny. These three companies exemplify the abuses of the modern economy. Two bougie tech firms which rely on a stalker economy that chronicles every movement, idea, purchase, and sort of every micro suggestion in a stalker economy with absolutely no accountability or consumer protection. And Walmart exists on the low end. Walmart, of course, employs a massive global workforce, almost all of whom are grossly underpaid, savagely abused, and its prices and practices undercut local businesses and have turned many communities into broad races to the bottom. Of course, its slightly better branded alternatives like Target practice the same methodologies. And Bernie Sanders is absolutely right to make this personal. The abuses of an obscene CEO like Jeff Bezos, the abuses of a pseudo-woke sociopath like Sheryl Sandberg can be used as case studies to not only reveal the sort of parasitic and immoral nature of our current capitalist elites, but also as case studies that open into structural realities that go far beyond any individual personality. These happen to be the people that right now are rewarded through education, luck, and timing, and have matched perfectly with their current stage of late phase capitalism, of relentless second by nanosecond trading, demands on labor, and ever sort of ruthless pushes outs to the extremes of what human beings and the planet are capable of absorbing in this mad rush of capital accumulation. Bernie Sanders' strategy of naming and shaming CEOs has been a welcome development when his Democratic colleagues are busy appeasing these very same interests. From Disney to Amazon and now to Walmart, Bernie Sanders has organized people across the country against the excesses of these corporations. It's been a successful strategy in gaining short-term victories over these companies who thrive when their abuses are hidden, and so many are hard to locate in order to do something about them. By concentrating attention on specific injustices by these companies and specifically naming CEOs and people responsible for these abuses, Bernie has not only brought these injustices to light, but has empowered and amplified the voices of working people to stop them. This is the kind of agitation that we need in mobilizing and synchronizing a class war. And believe me, we are a class war. We have been on the receiving end of a ruthless class war from the capital holders in this country. And no matter what might morons and propagandists and Koch-funded idiots who might tell you about competition kicking in or the magical religious powers of the marketplace, make no mistake about what is really happening in the form of massive inequality, decreased wages, diminished opportunities, and an environment that is being eaten to the core. We need to name and shame as a pathway to a structural critique, which serves as another pathway to a global class war from the bottom up so we can save, broaden, and reclaim democracy.
Competition would start kicking in.
I was waiting for it. That fucking Dunsky. All right, guys.
Did you happen to catch him saying that the government had nothing to do with Amazon moving to New York and Crystal City?
You know, the thing about it, when Dave Rubin says something like that, I kind of believe him. Because he's a stupid guy.
Wait, what do you mean you believe him? That he
might literally not know about anything inside the agreements between the states and Amazon.
Oh no, totally. Yeah, I don't think he's being disingenuous.
He's not being disingenuous. He's just being
ingenuous.
A fucking moron. Yeah,
or uningenuous, I guess.
He's incapable of
ungenuous.
Yes. Okay, here is Dave Rubin, the man at the perfect meeting point of cynicism and stupidity. Can anybody? I was on the Sit Down with Mike Racine, which is a great show last weekend. People should check it out. He's going to be on here in a couple weeks. He actually does a decent Dave Rubin impression. So I'm looking forward to that. But he goes, "Good Lord, this thread. Amazon's bringing in new jobs. We live in a free society. The company can do what it wants. People can decide to shop there. The government has nothing to do with all of this. They'll drop the democratic and go right to socialist soon enough." He's quote tweeting out.
I mean, where to start with that? What is fucking democratic about this whole shit?
Yeah, you mean like the non-voted upon allocation of over $1 billion of public resources to a private company without any oversight? You mean that part of the democratic process? What the fuck are you talking about?
It's almost uncomputationally dumb. Like you can't really even
if we
fully
ever
account
did a
for
show
it.
on Dave Rubin, it would be called Almost Incomputationally Dumb.
It's like dumb to the like fourth power.
I mean, we've got Ron Kim, who's an assemblyman in New York. Everybody needs to be out to focus on fighting for this bill. We might even have him on the show. And he's saying we need to immediately pass a bill through the legislature to end the over $1 billion giveaway to Amazon and immediately replace that with completely relieving over 1 million New Yorkers of their student loans, which is both the right thing to do and, if you want to measure it economically, would pay an infinitely bigger economic dividend. And so insofar as any part of this has been democratic, it's the bill to protect New Yorkers from this incredible screw-over scam bill, scam idea that Cuomo and de Blasio have cooked up. I mean, all right, this is Zellner Myrie, excuse me. I find it difficult. He was a state senator from Brooklyn. I find it difficult to reconcile outrage at Trump's tax cuts for the rich and praise #HQ2. The same fallacious argument undergirds both, that public money will drive the rich to invest in the rest of us. Hasn't happened before, and it won't happen again. We will #fight. Absolutely.
It's my representative.
Yeah. Indeed. We've got a good rep now.
What I like about him is that he didn't... I actually didn't know a whole lot of him besides he wasn't the IDC guy he was challenging, so I just voted for him.
You needed to get rid of the IDC guy. That's all we knew.
And it turns out, like, if this is what I get from that, like those types of Democrats these days in Brooklyn, like, I'm happy to...
Right. Now all of a sudden we've got a good guy in there.
Let's also not forget, just going back to Dave Rubin for a second, that the land that Amazon is going to build their headquarters on in New York City was slotted to be public housing.
Right.
So the government actually has a lot to do with it when you're talking about building a new headquarters.
What's public housing? That's socialism.
And now it's just public housing, a ravenous corporation.
Yeah. Competition would start kicking in. Of course, New York has, there's videos that come out every couple of weeks of people having massive rats running through their kitchens in New York City public housing. Like a grotesque humanitarian crisis that this great liberal administration hasn't achieved anything on. And they come through with this Amazon deal, which Bill de Blasio says having this massive corporation next to a huge public housing complex is synergy.
Yeah,
I'm sure we can all guess which Democrat president was good on rodent control.
Which would that be?
Go.
You should
LBJ.
Know. LBJ. LBJ like was very indignant because people kept making fun of him, but he's like, this is actually a real problem that a lot of people deal with in their homes. Is like they wake up and like literally their children are getting bit by rats.
LBJ, I mean, there's always the asterisk of genocide in Vietnam.
Yes, yeah.
And supporting coup in the Dominican Republic and so on, but he did great things domestically, and he also got it on some level. I mean, his own background, he also taught in dirt poor, predominantly Mexican students, and it affected him. I mean, I don't think it was all bullshit. I think he was pretty genuine about that.
You know who else had a very successful vermin program? Was Mao Zedong in China. And I'm very serious, actually. They gave out a public...
Sir, I'm very serious about Mao Zedong.
I don't know the year, but they gave out a public decree that rats are enemies of the people, and they gave like special incentives to folks for killing rats. And like within like 2 years, like hundreds of thousands of rats were killed across China, and like the vermin infestation was very much taken over.
And it's something, not the same thing, but some type of that type of ingenuity and can-do-itness we need to take to the fight against this Amazon deal. I mean, it's just pathetic, man. It's just pathetic. And we're going to do, I mean, I'll give you people a hint. We're going to do a cold open in the post game for patrons. We're going to revisit our buddies at Pod Save America. But most people know that from the Facebook profile that the Republican Oppo research firm that Facebook hired that double dipped, overall Facebook double dipped. On one hand, they wanted to accuse people protesting them of anti-Semitism. And then on the other hand, they used this Republican firm to try to suggest that all criticism of them was funded by George Soros, which is the stuff they funneled to the right-wing blogs. And this guy, Tim Miller, who's one of these like Republican cucks who doesn't like, Trump because he's rude, is on Pod Save America.
And because
all the
he's
time.
young and he wants a future
And
earning
he wants
potential.
a future. Right. And he's and the Pod Save America guys are like, oh yeah, it's totally good enough. Like you fucking, Tim Miller, like we disagree on like taxation, but I think like he likes the West Wing. So it's great to have you on. Wait, dude, fuck, did you do that? All right, let's get to the shout out. Okay, what is this?
It's just another detail. More offers, details of the offers that were given to Amazon have been leaking out.
Is this up on screen?
Yeah, it says the original tweet is Greg Bluestein. What Georgia offered to Amazon: a state-funded academy. Actually, Griscom, I can't see with the things in the wiki.
So Georgia didn't just offer Amazon $2 billion. We offered to segregate our educational and transit systems between Amazon and non-Amazon. How is this okay? But also, of course, corporate personhood will lead to corporate segregation of formerly public goods. What a perk to offer. But yeah, they offered them private train cars. They also offered them free parking at Atlanta Airport, which is one of the busiest airports in the world.
Are you fucking serious?
Yeah, and a dedicated car on their public transit service.
Oh, I guess that's like that was literally an Onion joke about New York. They actually offered that in Georgia.
No, I mean some of these attempts by other cities to get Amazon it's absolutely pathetic what New York City gave.
I want to see candidates running against the public officials who were, bending over backwards for Amazon in all cities across the country. For this. Hit them.
Hit them hard. The amount of good you could do with this money. And I don't want to ever hear another word. I mean, of course you will. But you know what? I'm not even going to say that. These people are dishonest and disingenuous. They'll say that there isn't enough money and all this bullshit. But anytime you hear a politician say there isn't enough money for universal student debt relief, for Medicare for all, for anything, for having a giant fucking public sponsored Coachella that's free of charge, okay? I don't give a fuck. And there isn't enough money for it. Remind them of this shit. There's enough money that in a rejected offer, the state of Georgia offers Amazon $2 billion. Get the fuck out of here. All right, let's stick to Georgia for the shout out. So it's clear Brian Kemp has stolen this election. The amount of voters he purged, the amount of voting irregularities, absolutely, almost certainly would have made up the margin that he was able to steal this election by. And Stacey Abrams has proven herself an incredible national leader in this process. We've been supporting her for a long time, talking about her. Our friend Danoa Changa did great work for her. Our friend Eric Robertson was also involved there. And the way she did this, we played as the cold open on Tuesday, the cucking of Al Gore when he acquiesced to an election that was stolen for George W. Bush by the Supreme Court. And he was just like, whoa. I'm not going to lie to you. I kind of enjoy it. And Stacey Abrams, this is how it's done. And people should look at what AMLO, who one of the brightest spots in the globe, is going to be inaugurated president of Mexico soon. In 2006, the election was stolen from him. And he led an alternative government in Mexico City as a former protest for several months. And I would like to see people do this in Georgia. I want mass, ongoing, continuous protests, and we will never stop talking about it. Brian Kemp's an illegitimate governor. He's a thief. And here is Stacey Abrams.
I acknowledge that former Secretary of State Brian Kemp will be certified as the victor in the 2018 gubernatorial election. But to watch an elected official who claims to represent the people in this state baldly pin his hopes for election on the suppression of the people's democratic right to vote has been truly appalling. So let's be clear. This is not a speech of concession. Because concession means to acknowledge an action is right, true, or proper. As a woman of conscience and faith, I cannot concede that.
Beautiful. Pure props to her. We will continue. She will continue. And we're going to fight for democracy in Georgia. Georgia is not a democracy. Georgia has an illegitimate governor. Georgia won this race. Brian Kemp is there through voter suppression. Period. Stacey Abrams is the rightful governor of that state. Unless they had a revote with a clean vote, non-voter suppression, non-engineered by scumbag Brian Kemp, and then we could see. But this is a stolen election. It's illegitimate, and she's 100% right, and we support her. We have solidarity, and we will continue on this, and Georgia will win. Brian Kemp's not the future. He's going to be another embarrassing asterisk. An embarrassing, destructive, and disgusting one, but an asterisk and a footnote nonetheless. Stacey Abrams is the future. He's the past. All right, we're going to talk about becoming a patron of the show, and then we're going to go to David Griscom for the GEM system before we get to Natalie Wynn, Contrapoint. And also, we should get the Bell House thing up there on screen, right? All right, so guys, start the pitch out. I want to test our respective pitch games. Griscom, go ahead.
You know, we're building something really exciting out here at TMBS, and I think that you should definitely be a part of it. Not only do we produce this show each week for the general public, we always do a post-game afterwards, and that's where things really get interesting.
They're very fun.
We get calls, we laugh a lot, we have fun, but it doesn't just end there. We move on. Each Monday, I do theory readings or theory videos where we explore a new topic or idea from some great thinker. On the left, we also have illicit histories where we explore the incredible history of left-wing opposition to the forces of barbarity and capitalism. And we're keeping on growing. And we really like you to be a part of it. We really need you to be a part of it. And this February, we're doing a live show, our first live show at the Bell House, which is going to be really fucking fun.
Yes, it is going to be really fucking
so
fun.
If you have a chance, come out for that too.
Oh, I'll keep the music going, guys. I can barely
I'll just reiterate, this...
I got to say, that was pretty good, Matt.
The live show
That was a pretty good pitch.
Well, I know I'm not even going to try to top it. But
okay, all right. Go ahead, live show.
The live show is this show trying to flex its muscles a little bit. And
I think that's a fair summation.
And I think it's looking like it's going to be quite a flex. And
it'll make your calves cramp.
You can come be part of it. Come drink 1 or 2 too many beers. There's alcohol at this thing, right?
Oh, that's 21 plus. Baby.
21. Oh, that's the other thing.
Yeah.
That's really the key selling point is, some people might be thinking about the Majority Report Bell House event, but that's 18 plus, which frankly, I don't know. It's gonna be fun, but that's kid stuff.
Yeah, okay. It's gonna be daytime. It's gonna be 18 plus. This is gonna be longer. It's gonna be 21 plus. I felt bad that we couldn't sneak some 18-year-olds that asked in, but it's gonna be fun. And the tickets are moving fast, so get them, and you'll already be there. It was actually, I heard through the grapevine, somebody buying their tickets, and they went to go book a hotel, and literally the person at this one place, which is by the Bell House, was like, "Oh, are you going to that show?" So that's a little bit of flex right there, guys. That's some legit flex. Get your tickets, Michael Brooks Show, Bell House, February 1st. We can't wait to see you there, of course, with Alona Minkowski, Trevor Beaulieu, Bhaskar Sunkara, and potentially one other guest. And really, we need you. Patreon.com/TMBS. We're back. We actually started moving fast again. So now we're up to, I checked before the show, we're up to 1,725. So that 2,000 goal is in the horizon, and that's definitely going to help us significantly. Subscribe to the Michael Brooks Show on YouTube. Start sharing the clips with your people. And, of course, you could also subscribe and write a review on iTunes.
We were a superpower. We are now a hyperpower.
We're an insurgency. We're sort of like, we're like the Viet Cong or the Taliban. Another thing that will be clipped by IDW idiots when I publish my book.
Start up. Come on, we need some of that action. We want
Hell
that
yeah.
heat.
Oh, we do. Actually, what was funny was I remember there's some sad troll that I have, but I keep him around because he's kind of funny. And I tweeted out a couple. It was true. I was literally a couple weeks ago. I think I was listening to Dipset and reading a Castro autobiography, and I thought it was just a funny like a funny mashup. You know, like listening to like Stevie Wonder and reading Tolstoy or something. Although actually Dipset and Castro are closer.
I have a very vivid memory of listening to Chopped and Screwed Chameleonaire album while reading Brave New World in high school.
It's fucking perfect. Exactly. That's what I'm talking about. So, but and I have a lot of admiration and respect for Castro, and I also have criticisms of Castro. He's a complicated historical figure. There's no doubt about it. And this guy like responded like, Castro, really? Like, what's next? Like Hitler and 50 Cent? Or something just actually I'm giving him too much, like it was that stupid, but not even as good an analogy. So yes, run with it, people on the right. We could use it. All right. Speaking of people who has nothing but unabashed admiration for communist dictators, and pretty soon November 27th is going to be meeting his maker when one Professor Richard Wolff is in studio. Richard Wolff has said he is going to go Pol Pot on his ass. David Griscom with the David Griscom Economic Minute, the gem, the Griscom economic system.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make a little complaint or just a general observation. So we all know PBR. That one beer that won a beer contest in the 1800s and still brags about it.
Right. Yes.
PBR actually might be shutting down because of its relationships with Miller. And I sort of wanted to investigate that a little bit just because we don't think about these things as much, especially with these kind of brands that we're used to having, and we just sort of understand how business works. So, Pabst is the maker of PBR, but they don't brew their own beer. And something that you'd actually be surprised about is a lot of the beers that you think are your local shitty beer. For example, I'm from Texas. Lone Star is like our local like crappy beer.
Sir, can I get a Lone Star? Have you ever said that in your life?
And it's like if you ever want to make money in Texas, just market it as something about Texas, and you'll make a shitload of money.
Yeah, Texas is a very narcissistic place.
But but also, in Maryland, there's Natty Bo, Old Milwaukee.
Fucking Natty, dude.
Dude, Natty Bo's great. I lived in D.C. for a while. But anyways, it's like all these beers that you think are local are actually
crab
owned
cakes and some
by
Natty.
by a large corporation, which is Pabst.
Right.
Pabst owns a shitload of beers.
Please tell me it's a European holding company.
No, it's an American asshole.
All right,
I can't remember his name
enough.
right now. But because they're unable to produce all these beers, they actually contract that out to Miller. And now Miller is refusing to brew beers for Pabst, which will basically mean that Pabst and all these other beers that we know actually might not be available in the near future. Yeah, this is the CEO of Pabst.
Eugene Kashper.
Yeah, a real winner.
Wearing a just nice T-shirt, CEO T-shirt.
Yeah, totally. Like I'm just like really committed to the Pabst experience. I got to tell you, from my experience doing like not much but a little bit of freelance brand stuff, talking about beer brands was one of the most obnoxious conversations you could ever like. The market incentive for people to sit in a beautiful office in Lower Manhattan and try to make beer deeper than it is one of the most incredibly pretentious activities.
Well, it's funny. It's
imagine.
like in Mad Men, the pilot episode where Draper is breakthrough is like, say they're toasted.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And the process to get to that type of insight is like, well, you're like in your early 30s now, so like, are you drinking differently now? It's like, yeah, I started.
I've got a little bit more money now.
Yeah, no, literally, literally. I started drinking Scotch, and I used to think I didn't like how it tasted, but I realized it's just because I didn't used to be able to afford it.
No, but trust me, there's plenty of bad beer out there. But I just want to make this point because for people who, they do have their loyalties. And, as we just opened up our Miller High Life, Miller High Life has been brought up now as an alternative to PBR.
Right.
And now that it's sort of taken over a larger part of market share, now Miller is starting to push back about brewing PBR. And the point that I want to make about this is that monopoly capital actually makes our societies very confusing and often very stupid at times.
Right.
It's not something that, as people like our friend David Rubin would talk about, make the world more efficient and give you more choices. Because it's...
No, do it.
Oh, no.
Fuck.
Well, competition will start kicking in.
Competition would start kicking in.
Because it's just as rational for the market to buy up or prevent other alternatives.
Monopoly would start kicking in.
I feel I have to get the gushing out first.
As we saw a couple shows ago when I was talking about Filmstruck being shut down,
right?
Because they don't want to have the competition because now that Warner Media's has taken over Filmstruck. And it's just one of these things where it's not a system that always creates efficiency. You want to talk about something, talk about deindustrialization. When they've shut down factories, right, they're not always doing it because they're moving it overseas. Oftentimes they're doing it because it makes more sense to shut down any competition. This is something that happened all across Eastern Europe after capitalism came into Eastern Europe. You saw car companies being completely shut down, right? Bought out by Western firms. And then all of those factories sitting dormant because it made a larger market share for Volkswagen to be able to sell their cars. Now, when I'm talking about PBR and the end of PBR, now I don't even particularly like PBR. I'm more of a Shiner Bock guy anyway.
Yeah, you are.
Over anything. But
I'll have a Shiner Bock, sir. Could I interest you in a conversation on Ho Chi Minh?
These aren't tiers over specific companies, but it's the fact that Lone Star is produced in North Carolina, right? Or Natty Boh is made in Georgia. It makes their systems very complicated, and oftentimes it can run into these very obscure and bizarre hiccups that can interrupt, entire brands that people build identities around or whatnot. So if you want to talk about a system that's not efficient, you want to talk about a system that just creates problems left and right for itself, you got to talk about capitalism, and you specifically need to talk about monopoly capitalism, because that's a system that will eat itself before it tries to produce better alternatives. You look at something like Toys R Us.
Capitalist will sell himself the last can of PBR.
That's a good flip on it. No, but it's one of these things. It's like you look at what happened with Toys R Us. You have an entire organization, it just gets completely stripped because you could make a higher return. Because if the logic is always to find the highest return on capital, you're going to find these things where entire organizations are just shut down because another organization finds that it's in their benefit to just destroy production in other areas. So pour one out for PBR. It's going to be a huge lawsuit. It's probably not the end of them. But it's just one of these reminders of how inefficient our system is. Yeah, I mean,
This reminds me of when Apple bought Lala.com, which, if people don't remember, it was around 2009 and 2010. For a little bit, if you Googled a song, the first result would be a Lala.com thing, and you could literally stream it from the Google landing page. And Apple bought it up and killed it a month later.
Killed it, right.
Incredible.
So as to facilitate its monopoly, right. All right, David, perfect. Guys, we're going to take, by the way, if you're listening to this, give this a minute or two, because we're going to play some great interstitial music from the brilliant DJ Danarchy, and Matt is going to give you a little bit of selected drops. We'll be back in a couple of minutes with Natalie Wynn, Contrapoints, on the Michael Brooks Show.
That story is complete garbage.
This is so deep. It's a deep state.
Welcome back to the Michael Brooks Show. I'm Michael Brooks. Joining us now is Natalie Wynn. She is the proprietor, the host, creative director, writer, visionary behind Contrapoints. Natalie, thanks so much for being here.
Hi, Michael. Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone.
Everybody is glad to have you return. You guys could say hi, or you could wave.
Hi, Natalie.
Hey.
How's it going?
It's going pretty good. Just did a photo shoot, no big deal, but here I am.
This is I feel like tonight it must be something going on astrologically, because like I'm wearing a suit and tie. And
what is it? It's a retrograde Mercury or something. Yeah, that's what it is.
Retrograde Mercury is totally what it is, exactly. I do like though. Because I get annoyed by logic nerds. So like I remember like people like this one guy tweeted out something like, I can't believe in 2018 that people blah 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 make decisions based on astrology. And I like totally hit him back with like, that is such an Aquarius thing to say, dude.
Yeah, well, it's a very Aquarius thing to say. Also, and you've got to use astrology to own the logic nerds.
Exactly. That's what I think. Also, I think in a world where libertarianism is like a front and center global economic philosophy, we absolutely should be able to have astrology.
I agree.
So, Natalie, we're going to get to how you recently owned Ben Shapiro at Facts and Logic. How
of course.
Did an incel video, which is literally maybe the most disturbing thing I've seen in my life, and I didn't even
I'm so sorry.
It was fucking intense. Before we get to that, I just, as I say, this is a pretty policy-oriented show. The Trump administration is considering moves that would literally erase trans identity. And, we have, I guess, could you just speak to that first?
Well, the White House released a memo a few weeks ago, which basically recommended the removal of the word gender from all human rights law and suggested legally defining sex as sex at birth as determined by genitals, basically. So what that would do is basically give trans people, first of all, no recourse when it comes to protection from discrimination, housing discrimination, employment discrimination, all of which is very common, and it's important for us to have some kind of recourse. And then also it would sort of keep us from ever being able to change our gender marker on our identification, which it turns out to be quite important when you're dealing with situations at airports or situations in law enforcement, and so especially actually situations with law enforcement where you don't necessarily want to out yourself as transgender to every cop that you're talking to.
Right. So I mean, this hasn't, like any number of really disturbing, directives from the Trump administration, hasn't happened yet. A lot of things have happened. And it seems to me, I mean, there are the policy implications on how to fight back against it. And then there's also just, I think, the underlining that for the Republican Party and for right-wing politics today, this is a core marker of the modern use of actually, in reality, right-wing identity politics as an emotional driver to stir up bigotry, freak people out, and hit the sort of erogenous zones, their base, essentially.
Yeah, that's right. They seem to be using it basically the way that protecting marriage was used by this Bush administration, a decade ago.
Yes, exactly. So what has been the response in terms of sort of organizing against it? What kind of feedback have you seen and observed? What has your sense been also from like the other side? Like, are you happy with, I don't know, the coverage even in sort of like mainstream liberal outlets or in the Democratic Party? What's your kind of feeling about that?
Well, there was some mainstream coverage of this White House memo when it came out, as well as Trump's transgender military ban tweets. Mm-hmm. But I would say that in general, there were some protests, I know, at the White House in New York City when the memo came out. But apart from that, I wish I had seen more people talking, like people who are not trans, speaking up about this, because we're not a huge group, and so I understand that not everyone feels much of a connection to trans people, but we're big enough that the Trump administration has decided to mess with us. Right. And I think that it's important to stick up for people who don't have a lot of allies, because, that's, as we all know, first they come from the most vulnerable groups, and then once they've sort of established they can get away with that, they start coming for everyone else. So it's not a good idea to even let them start. So I would like to see more outspoken defense of trans people from the attacks of this administration from people who don't necessarily have a personal connection.
Right. Absolutely. And I definitely think that there is a broader set of things, particularly with obviously things like caging children, immigration, the sort of the terrorism of those policies, and I use that word very specifically, the proposals on targeting transgender people and so on. That these are I mean, in some cases they aren't just test runs. I mean, they're barbarism focused on vulnerable groups as a test run for a larger deployment of barbarism. You're totally right.
Yes. I think that maybe that's not explicitly what they're planning, but they will do they'll do these things because they have some popular support for them, for especially sentiment against immigrants and against trans people, and I think it sort of will in fact be a kind of test. If they get away with this, well, we know that there's a norm established where if a group is kind of unpopular enough, you can just kind of take their rights away. That's not a good precedent to set.
Indeed. Let's actually talk about some of the intellectual infrastructure behind this, if we're going to call it intellectual, but some of the sort of context behind this sort of freak out and fixation on transgender people. And so I've got to talk about Mr. Logic and Facts himself, Ben Shapiro. And I was thinking of him the other day, and I happened across your channel in preparation for this interview, and you have a new video out on pronouns, which I admit I learned from people like you and other academics and public intellectuals. And I learned, what I really like about your work is you do a history of these terms, actually, and you actually fit it into literally how they're deployed, not just the sort of like static metaphysical facts. And it actually turned out that through doing this, you were able to own Ben Shapiro with facts. And don't ruin it for me, Natalie. You were able to own Ben Shapiro with facts, logic, and maybe I should add empathy and history. But can you explain, what is Ben Shapiro doing when he makes those arguments, and how did you go about responding to them?
Well, I think, essentially what he's doing is It's actually a little weird to me that Ben Shapiro is so fixated on trans people, but I think that it comes down to the same reason that Trump bothers to mention it. It's kind of just an easy rallying point for anyone who has kind of reactionary politics. It's just a simple punching bag, right? And I think that what Ben Shapiro does is he's got some techniques for appealing to kind of misunderstandings about trans people in a way that basically disrespects us at the most fundamental level. So, or denies our reality, basically kind of throws us off as crazy people is the goal. It's like it's sort of akin to the argument of like comparing gay marriage to bestiality or something, where there's this like subtle dehumanization that's going on. And what Ben Shapiro has really focused on is this pronouns thing. I'm not exactly sure why, but people seem to get really caught up on pronouns when it comes to trans people. Like, oh, I shouldn't have to use these pronouns, or like what, and Ben Shapiro goes right for that. So his basic argument, I guess, is that, pronouns are determined by your chromosomal sex, and then we should only use pronouns corresponding to the chromosomal sex of the person we're talking about to preserve honesty about biology is the cause he's allegedly backing. But of course, that's not how pronouns are used. You don't do a karyotype test before using someone's pronouns. It's a social.
I did that for my producers before they came on my show.
Oh, you had all of them genotyped, of course.
That's right. I had them genotyped as part of a rigorous screening process.
Of course.
Of course.
Yeah, but the reality is you just can't, like, that's not how pronouns work. It's never how pronouns have worked. This is a basic kind of sort of feature of the way we sort of linguistically and socially interact. So the analogy I like to use is adoptive parents. So, you could say, if you were like, wanted to make a Ben Shapiro type argument about adoptive parents, you could say the definition of a parent is one who brings forth offspring. So an adoptive parent's not a real parent. An adoptive parent's a glorified kidnapper. Well, suppose you have a child of adoptive parents who, they never knew who their biological parents were. They've been raised their entire lives by their adoptive parents. Like, who's that child's real parents? I would say that is the people who stayed up all night raising them. And in the same way, for a transgender woman like me, I live my life as a woman. All the people close to me know me as a woman. I'm called a woman by strangers I run into. Like, everyone basically calls me she without much trouble. So it's just simply a weird kind of like pedantry that's posing itself as logic. That's just completely out of touch with the reality of the way language is used, which of course doesn't, and then what he's suggesting is that I, for instance, am delusional about my biology, which of course I'm not delusional about my biology. It's not a disagreement about biology. I know what my biology is, probably better than Ben Shapiro does.
Probably.
And that's not why I suggest them to be called she. It's because that's how language works. That's how gender and language works.
What do you think? I love that you said pedantry, because we've been actually trying to rebrand like what people on the right are calling logic and facts and reason with basically sophistry and pedantry.
Yes.
Why are those things so confused?
Well, I think that pedantry can appear like logic. Because it sort of oftentimes pedantry will argue from definition, which is something also that you'd sometimes do in like mathematics or logic. So it has kind of the aesthetics of a logical argument, though of course the difference is that pedantry is often a complete distraction from the actual point being made or the actual substance. So some of the most common like alt-right pedantry you see all the time is like this kind of like, well, this person couldn't be a fascist because they don't follow Benito Mussolini, and a fascist technically is the movement from the 1930s,
Exactly.
or this kind of argument where like instead when you're calling them a fascist, of course, you mean that they're a kind of authoritarian, racist populist, and so to go to this like really specific sub-definition of fascism and to insist that that's the only thing the word can mean, it's really just sleight of hand posing as logic.
Right, exactly. And I remember when on election night, actually, I won't get into the specific example because I'm friendly with the person, even though we have radically different politics. But they went to, and I should say the Brazilian election, which we've covered extensively on this show, and people are calling Bolsonaro a fascist for not only, I mean, it's an absolutely appropriate use of the word, even down to the fact that actually neo-fascism was coined to describe the Brazilian military junta, of which he was in fact a low level, but literally a part of. And, you know, people on Twitter were immediately going to, I can't even remember, they were so nonsensical, but yes, just focusing on the most bizarre, nonsensical way, and even conceding the substance. Like, he might be a mass murdering far right, you know, jerk, but however, blah 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 blah. And it's like, guys, what are you doing? I mean, this is just, what is the emotional need that's filled by being so annoying and ridiculous?
It's really hard for me to understand this urge to protect mass murdering far right extremist politicians from the word fascist. Like, I can't understand why you would want to do that, except unless you want to protect and defend them and their rule. So I kind of tend to take it like as just basic apologism for these people. Like, I don't know what else to read it as.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, because even if it's, you know, it's one of these things that even if it's not intentional, that's what it is performatively, I would say.
Absolutely.
So even if I'm not, you know, assigning the bad attentions, that is what it is. Why is Ben Shapiro so, I mean, to best you could speculate, what is this fixation on pronouns? I mean, I guess you kind of said it earlier, but it's like, it seems that his whole brand has been built on that. And somehow somebody whose whole career has essentially been just being like literally like a teen through young adulthood far-right pundit has somehow been able to use basically going on college campuses and internet shows and hectoring transgender people. He's gotten, you know, that becomes the cool kid philosopher in the New York Times. I mean, is that still the same reflection of just like the poverty of our ability to do philosophy?
I think it is that in part, but I think it's the whole thing is really just a substitution for kind of backlash against trans people. Like, I think the pronoun issue again is kind of it's a fake issue, right? It's pedantry in the way that arguing over the definition of fascism is, you know, it is in a case where someone's clearly a mass murdering far right extremist. Like, I think that you know, the reason that they're focusing on pronouns is, suppose you take one of these situations that Jordan Peterson wants to, you know, defend the right of a person to do. Like, you have an employment situation where you have a trans person at an office and, like, say, two coworkers, and one coworker genders the trans person correctly, the other insists on misgendering. Like, until you actually think through what if you actually think through what that situation is like, basically any social interaction between these people comes to a screeching halt because it's so linguistically like uncomfortable and like you just sort of can't function in a world where you have like a person insisting on misgendering you. So basically what insisting on not using the right pronouns for someone is doing is basically denying them the ability to function in that social setting. So it's basically like the bathroom issue. The whole thing is basically a way of trying to exclude trans people from public life, trying to basically shut trans people out of society. So the idea that we're defending biology is just as nonsensical as the idea that the opposition to gay marriage was a defense of heterosexual marriage.
Right. Now, I do want to touch on this. As I said, it was legitimately really disturbing to watch. What is happening? You actually took it upon yourself to research and come back with a real report from the incel internet. And you know, I got to say, like, for me, I mean, I know they exist and I'm familiar with a few of the terms or whatever, but this is not stuff that I've driven that deeply into. Now, I probably should, because probably the incel forums are where like the next crop of like Republican foreign policy makers are going to come from. But that being said, what did you find, Natalie?
Yeah, so I spent a dark couple weeks on incel forums, and I found a community of very, very lost, mostly youngish men who have sort of failed to really form any kinds of relationships with women. These are mostly heterosexual men, and they've kind of used that rejection or those experiences of rejection or just sort of social isolation as an excuse or as a reason for kind of this memeing of self-loathing, and also, of course, a memeing of misogyny, of hatred for women. And oddly, this often ends, maybe not so oddly, but it often goes straight to far-right politics as well.
How does that work? What is that process of it goes hate of self to hate of women, and then that broadens out? And this is the same reason why, Steve Bannon was very adroit and interested in using these forums. How does that hate travel and turn into a macro narrative?
Well, I think the way that the self-loathing becomes loathing of women is that this resentment and sadness that results from the rejection, kind of the blame for this gets placed on women. So there's a kind of hostility towards women who are blamed for, this person's inability to like have the social or romantic life that they want. And then the way that gets the way misogyny is politicized, right, is that, basically these people who feel very rejected, they say, look, feminism is what made this possible. This is their red pill or black pill worldview, where you say that, I'm being rejected because of, feminism has essentially empowered women to reject me. And it's opened up dating so that now, women only want to date chads who are like these alpha males, right, supposedly. And they don't want to date incels like me, is what they're saying. And so then that turns into resentment of feminism. Where does feminism come from? Well, then you start that's where the deep dive stuff comes in, because alt-right people can come in, and then feminism gets blamed on globalists, or it gets and then you're fully on the Trump train at that point.
Right. I mean okay. So all right. So I want to disaggregate a few things. That ecosystem, I think you described it perfectly, and there's a lot of reporting that really underlines this. And even somebody like Scott Atran, who's an anthropologist who does ethnographic research on terrorism, he goes right into this space, and he hasn't done the same research yet, but he's certainly, kind of analytically and at a certain surface level, there's a lot of parallels between, Al-Qaeda and getting into these scenes. And he's not saying it's all the same, but literally the same kind of psychological mechanisms and social isolation and then group dynamics. But should we try to tease apart, I guess, three things I basically want to ask you. One, you posted a Reddit story, because we follow each other on Twitter, and I think you tweeted out, if I'm not mistaken, it was a Reddit story of a father whose son, I mean, it was just terrifying. I don't even really want to fill it in for people, honestly. And maybe I'll just take this point as a standalone. His son, who he identified as an incel and being part of this scene, it's gradually revealed, and again, this is on Reddit, and I have to be honest with you, I'm hoping that the story is not true, but the story is revealed that, this is a kid who's extremely fucked up, if I could use the vernacular, and this is not somebody who's just socially isolated and glomming onto some toxic, horrible stuff. This is somebody who maybe has some pedophilic tendencies. This is somebody who has a very sick relationship with his sister. Again, I don't want to elaborate on it, but what I saw in that was, okay, I guess my point being is that this is connected to this group, but this is or if this person represents all of this group, then I mean, I don't know what we can do with that. So, I mean, to what extent are we talking about people that are totally far gone here as represented in that story?
Yeah, so the Reddit story, as you said, a lot of people have questioned whether it's true. But if it's not true, it's a amalgamation of true stories.
Right.
I think that if you read incel forums, and it's clear that there are many people on those forums who somewhat resemble this person. And I think that my sense is that most people posting on incel forums are not so far gone as this person who is sort of violent, sexually violent, possibly pedophilic. Right. Really, I don't think it's always that bad, but I do think that is kind of an extreme place that some of these men could end up if they don't get out of this. Where I think the some of this stuff has to do with like there's a kind of like stunted development that comes from like almost like a sort of like hikikomori-esque like shutting oneself away from the world that these guys do, often like only playing video games or spent like having no social life outside of like 4chan and Reddit incel forums, and like that kind of isolation and that kind of like kind of these spending all your time in this sort of positive feedback loop of toxic thinking like can suck people from a medium dark place to a very, very dark place. And that's kind of what I see happening on incel forums. They kind of come together, each having some problems that are real, and then they take those real problems and then they sort of collectively get together to make them much, much worse. So, you have like, there's this thing you see on these incel forums, I'll say content warning for discussion of suicide, but like they'll post like what they call suifuel, like memes of basically things that are supposed to be so despair inducing that they make you want to kill yourself. And it's like, this is like exactly the opposite of like everything they should be doing right now, right? Like it's like anti-therapy. Like they get together to make everything worse. Yeah.
Right. So there must be some type of kind of like negative emotional reward or something for doing that. But what you said, I'm curious, when you say some of them are legitimate did I hear you right? Like what are the actual problems? Because this is another thing that I do wonder on the left. Like we respond to things, I think, usually, and by the way, I'm not often rightly. We go to two places. I think sometimes I was talking with a friend about this, Ben Burgess, who actually is writing a book on reclaiming logic, in fact, for the left. And he was saying we go to moral places, or we go, I guess, more in my zone, we go to, mockery and comedy and satire and so on. But so in that, and I think it's very easy, especially with like this incel thing, is it's like, first of all, I guess, on a kind of macro picture, like in the grand scheme of things, what the fuck are you complaining about? Or on the other hand, it's an inviting target to make fun of. But actually, social anxiety, social isolation, a feeling of despair in terms of human connection is actually not nothing. I mean, what's real there? Nothing. Yeah. Yeah.
I think, one issue that I find that where like a lot of the kind of leftist discourse just doesn't have enough to say has to do with the situation that a lot of incels are in, where, a lot of like feminist discourse talks about male privilege, which I think is fine. Like it's like the term male privilege is designed to like point out to someone, point out to men that they are not experiencing these hardships that women are experiencing, and that they have this kind of power, these advantages that women don't. But pointing out that someone has a certain kind of structural power by no means implies that they're happy, that they're leading a fulfilling or adequate life in any way. And I think that, there needs to be some way to discuss the fact that, like, for a lot of men as well as women in society, like things seem, subjectively to be going very, very badly, even if they're not living in like horrible poverty, or even if they're not facing like forms of like gendered oppression and the kinds of things that we're usually more focused on the left. There's still a kind of personal despair, which doesn't have nothing to do with the way society's organized. I know a lot of, leftist critics of this will say, like, we need to have a conversation about how, like, capitalism as it is that like leads incels into the situation. And I think that is generally the right idea, although I personally don't yet have a way of making that story really compelling, I think.
Right. Well, I think there's a problem broadly with the left that we're the people who, whether it's Marxist or whether it's feminist, I mean, just in a really broad brush, we're the ones who kind of say, oh, well, that thing sucks, and here's like the big macro context behind it. And the right has actually a big advantage because they have much more ability to, well, I mean, not in the incel scene because it just seems so toxic and self-defeating, but Jordan Peterson, as an example, can fit some very sensible and probably even positive self-help stuff with a broader far right narrative. And I think that is actually somehow, I mean, my joke of this show is like, listen to Dipset, take a run, read Marx. As the sort of like, you know, have some fun, try to like get out, engage in life. And yes, frankly, especially in these incel forums, it would seem that probably a lot of basic like self-care and hygiene and things like that would go a massive way. Maybe seeing an actual therapist about social phobias, and then also connecting to a bigger sense of life. But we can't just dismiss, like, even if it seems diluted and it's filled with all these toxic things, we can't just say that everything that's going on there is bullshit. Your video really convinced me of that. There's some very real and actual social problems, particularly for, you know, like a young man going through puberty, or it manifests in a different way. But as you pointed out, the last thing I'll add is that term actually came initially from a woman. So there's also like women having this experience, and obviously it manifesting in a very different way, but this is a real problem broadly.
Yeah, loneliness. It's like the starting point for a lot of extremist politics, and I think that it's worth being understanding how the way that works. I think what you're saying is right. That one difficulty with approaching, one disadvantage the left maybe sort of inherently has is that oftentimes when we're approaching a group like, say, incels, we're saying like, look, all the reasons why you think that things are going bad are not actually the reasons, and you need to look at this big structural picture. Whereas I feel like the Jordan Petersons or Ben Shapiro's are coming in and they're saying like, oh, all of your like lowest suspicions and resentments, that's all true. Like it really is women and globalists. Like, But I think that, young men are in a difficult situation. I think, like, I was just having a conversation with someone about how, I think a lot of men feel sort of intimidated by the Me Too movement, and they feel that like sort of, they're being told that, they've been like, fed this like alpha male sexual script their whole life about, how to act toward women. And now they're being told that that's actually immoral, or it's not just. And so they're sort of confused about like, okay, how does heterosexuality work now? And I think that there needs to be a new script that comes to show people like to show like men and women how to relate to each other. And like I think, of course, I fully support and am behind the Me Too movement, but I think in its wake, what needs to happen now is like we need a new positive vision for like what dating is going to look like. Because I think that's a thing that like. A lot of young men are feeling a little bit lost about, and I do kind of sympathize.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Across the board. As a final question, I mean, has there been any hopeful responses from that committee, from that community to your work?
I'm actually very happy with the way it was received. I mean, obviously, it was posted on incel forums and they weren't having any of it. But I've in the comments in that video and in my email, like I've gotten like quite a few messages from people who are being like, oh gosh, like you're very right about the way that I'm using these forums to like self-harm essentially. Yeah. And I am going to stop doing this. So I think that's just the beginning for these people, like, but I think it's a good start. It's a great start. If you can get out of that toxic, feedback loop, like that's the first, that's freedom. Like that's the beginning of improving your life.
Oh, that's so awesome. That's great to hear. Yeah. Natalie Wynn, I really appreciate your time as always. Contrapoints, you can find all of her work on YouTube, and it is absolutely distinct work and incredibly valuable for all of these conversations and things we need to do moving forward. Natalie, thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Take care.
Bye.
All right, folks, we are going to take a brief break, and we're going to come right back with Corey Pein. Doubleheader tonight, and then we go to the postgame.
Hey, shut up!
And you're not just, I don't think I'm getting across the logic of it.
The more aggressive, psychopathic boys?
To help with connectivity.
Treat me like a black person! Propaganda, manipulating liberal politics. Oh, yeah,
And where it should have stopped is at the deal standpoint, where they thought about it.
Now, we all know who the haters are. Very few of them prosper.
Ask the moms.
I worked for him, yes, I was a politically commissioned officer.
You have a wonderful day, bro, and I'll see you again soon.
And they ended up finding themselves in this whole irony, and it's just kind of amusing.
Tomorrow's news today.
What do you think about that? Do you even care?
Garbage-laced lip service.
I have never called Mr. Figure's boy.
The so-called progressives are actually regressive.
Why not just cover me in a bucket of blood?
They don't write good. They don't know how to write good.
I mean, excuse my language, but you son of a bitch.
Welcome back to the Michael Brooks Show, a sound drop selection over the great DJ Danarchy. Joining us now is crew. Corey Pein, he's host of the News from Nowhere podcast. Become a patron. He's author of Live, Work, 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 Die. Corey Pein, thank you for finally returning to the Michael Brooks Show. The last time you were here, you were in studio and very lit.
Is that right? I feel like I've been on since then, or maybe it was majority.
I think I had you on majority since then.
Well, thanks for making it happen. I wasn't that drunk.
I don't know that you were at all drunk. If you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. So I am in Canada now. I got here like 2 days ago.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Canadian journalist Corey Pein.
Big
now.
news. Corey has upgraded from Portland, Oregon to Canada.
How's the weather up there?
How's the weather, dude?
Fucking freezing. It was 8 degrees Fahrenheit today, and I went out trying to find weed, and they're out everywhere.
What do you mean they're out? Canada's out.
Well, they just legalized, and they didn't send out enough to the shops. So
that literally sounds like an Entourage episode.
We didn't make enough.
That sounds like an Entourage episode. In fact, I think that was an Entourage episode. L.A. went dry because of like a fire or something, and Vince couldn't get high. And then they found
I need to make some
weed,
friends
and
up
they
here.
were like, oh, we got weed. Let's go to Vegas.
Yeah. Do you
That
want to
was-
give out your location to try to find a?
Yeah, if you have any patrons in Alberta, have them get in touch.
We might. We have a real Canadian contingent. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, Corey. I know how happy weed makes you.
It's more like it's not a question of happiness; it's a question of stability.
Right there with you, buddy.
Yeah. Matt is very much on the train. I mean, everybody likes weed. It's
not everybody does like weed. A lot of people find it makes them paranoid or uncomfortable or whatever. So
See, I don't,
that's
I'm
fine.
not.
I
I
don't
don't smoke that much, but I pretty much always like it when I do. I don't know. I don't get paranoid on weed. I think I just don't like the slow reaction time, unless I'm in the right mood for it.
Well, it sounds like you need to start dabbing.
I think the people that get paranoid on weed aren't paranoid enough about the real world.
Right.
Oh yeah, sure.
Whoa, fucking you! I haven't thought of that before, dude. Did you think of what did William S. Burroughs say? He said that a paranoid is someone with all the facts.
Yes, and to reiterate a message that I've said many times before on this show, the most informed people I know are the most worried.
That's the truth. I want to say I remember one time several years ago. This was a really good. I've smoked enough weed in my day to have like my that was a good high stories, and especially like all of those stories. I don't know if they'll resonate with anybody else, but I'll tell it anyways because I enjoyed it. I was hanging out with a couple of people. It was a mellow thing, like very Brooklyn brownstone apartment. Smoked. I immediately asked for Mexican food and got an order. And then one of the girls that was there, she was gossiping about, like, it was like, I don't know, like one of her friends' boyfriends or something. And I remember she's like, she messed up have his cake and eat it too, because she just turned it into like, he wants to have his cake and like more cake. Like she just messed it up. And I just started giggling, like looking straight at her. And then I would pause for a couple of minutes and I would kind of close my eyes and be in my own space. And I would look up and I go, is the food here yet? And they go, no, it's not here yet. And then I look at her and I start laughing again. And I did that cycle like 4 times, 5 times, maybe more. And then I listened to Bob Marley on the roof, and that was good.
That sounds like a perfect stoner moment. The only thing missing is someone sort of sanctimoniously piping up to say how much gentler and more benign that was than had you been hammered on alcohol.
Yeah, the contrast. See, if you were drunk, you would have been so mean about it. Right.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm going to keep investigating this situation with the weed shortage in Canada. But
the weed shortage in Canada. Corey Pein is done writing about corporate feudalism. He's found like a real story. Where's the fucking Canadian weed? Corey, did you read the New York Times Facebook piece?
Yo.
Are you there?
Yeah, we cut out for a second.
Okay,
yeah, of course I read it. I mean, it was everybody should read it. I saw some people pointing out that they didn't see a lot of posts of it on Facebook for some reason. It's almost like a company that would hire GOP smear artists to spread anti-Semitic conspiracy theories while hiring another company to slander its critics as anti-Semitic is burying a big piece of bad news about itself. Who would have thought?
Who would have done anything? Now, that being said, doesn't Sheryl Sandberg come out like a very responsible corporate citizen?
I don't have the stomach for this, but I wish someone would go back a few years and dig up all of the fluff pieces that were written about her.
Yep.
And just sort of pull out the choice parts. You know, there was a bit of that when Theranos went down and people pulled up the New Yorker profile of Elizabeth Holmes and you know, like the Time magazine piece, and just said, like, what were these people smoking? Did they not do a minimal amount of research before they wrote these hagiographies? And the answer is no, of course they didn't.
Yeah, right. I was going to say.
You know,
of course not.
The difference is with Sandberg and Zuckerberg, we're talking about people whose, you know, misconduct is continuous and flagrant, and they're not exactly, well, Sandberg maybe more so than Zuckerberg has a better reputation, but they're not exactly like beloved figures.
And what's funny is he comes out better than she does, just in the very limited sense that he is clearly, and especially, like, I don't know why you'd want to do this, but if you want, what I'm saying is, like, he is so clearly out of his depth, and he's an egomaniac, and he's deluded, and he's totally committed and has no ethical qualms about what he's doing. But he's the one who really is more in, like, Silicon Valley La La Land, where she's like the operator in the sense that she knows how Washington works. She knows what kind of firms you hire. She knows what offices need to be called. She knows how it works. And that comes across every second of the piece.
I think they both come off like complete sociopaths.
True.
Not just with this latest story, which, you know, to summarize in case anybody's watching or listening missed it. I mean, it's a story by multiple Times reporters that unearthed a number of horrifying things about Facebook's business practices, but probably the top line item was the revelation that, as I summarized, they had actually hired a Republican PR firm / research firm to spread, to link some of their critics to George Soros conspiracy. Now this is in the context, obviously, of a huge wave of anti-Semitism in the U.S., stoked by the GOP. Soros, what was it, 2 weeks ago? It's hard to keep track now, got a pipe bomb in his mailbox. And the guy they hired, as I think I heard you point out on Majority this morning, was one of the Pod Save America guys.
Hey, welcome back to Pod Save America. We have our friend Tim, who like totally is offended by Trump being tasteless. He's like we disagree on stuff, but like, Tim, what have you been up to this morning?
Well, the overall gist of the story, though, was that Zuckerberg and Sandberg had essentially ignored a lot of warnings about from other management that the company was really screwing up in Myanmar and elsewhere with the whole fake news campaign, the Russian disinformation. Just really ignored tons of warnings and blamed subordinates. And, you know, Sandberg, I believe CBS got a statement or a couple of questions out of her today, and her response was to blame subordinates again.
Yeah.
So, you know,
it's also called leaning in, Corey.
Yeah, everything they've done in response to the story has essentially verified the substance of the story. Even though they're saying that, we didn't hire this firm to spread these, you know, this vile, hateful propaganda. They're really saying, it was like the PR team did it. I mean, imagine how it must be to work for these people, either directly for them or 2 levels down or at any level. If this is how they react under pressure. And, you know, the other thing about this story is that it's caused, my book that you plugged at the beginning, Live, Work, 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 Die, Journey to the Savage Heart of Silicon Valley, just got a very nice write-up in Jacobin, by the way.
Perfect.
Check it out. Yeah. It was really highly critical of Silicon Valley. And if anything, I'm coming to realize this week that I was wrong. I was too generous to these executives, if nothing else. I mean, the level of deception and malevolence on display in that Times story is, well, I put it in a tweet I think as Exxon level evil.
Yes.
And it really is.
Yes.
I mean, it's not like they're extracting fossil fuels and contributing to climate change, although they do in their own way. But Facebook is essentially selling itself, as best I can figure, as a kind of coup machine. I mean, when you look globally at what's been happening with this rising wave of fascism, Facebook is always right there.
Right.
They bought WhatsApp some years ago, and that was a major factor in the Bolsonaro election in Brazil, spreading misinformation. The same has been true in Eastern Europe and elsewhere. In Myanmar, they contributed to a genocide.
Yep. The murder,
which
the genocide
UN,
of the Rohingya, which is still one of the main issues of today. We've talked about it a touch on the show. We will do more. It's implicated there, and at every step of the way, from the stuff that frankly is a problem, but more I don't even want to say debatable, but more like, oh, look at this silly GOP propaganda that your grandmother shared, or look at this, ridiculous like African Americans for Trump thing. Okay, whatever. But that still is propaganda. It still is misinformation. They do nothing about that. But this also runs straight through literally like the organization of digital lynch mobs and their sort of default, oh, we're a platform.
And I will tell you that when I was reporting my book, I sat in conference rooms, big auditoriums in San Francisco, where Facebook sent managers to pitch government people on how to, actually this was a DC conference I spoke. They were pitching all these government people and political consultants and whatnot on, how to use Facebook to get their message across or to achieve certain goals. Yep. And I can only suspect strongly, can't prove, that their collaboration with the genocide in Myanmar and with these other activities that we're hearing about, a lot of the blame has been pinned on Cambridge Analytica, but I'm almost certain that Facebook's role was much more direct than has been reported. And we need congressional investigations to figure out exactly what's going on, because this company is setting itself up as more important than the election process itself, and more important than the news media. I mean, every single major media company is dependent on Facebook to reach its audience these days.
Let's play this clip. I agree entirely, obviously. Matt has cooked up some, no doubt, disturbing clip for us. I don't know what this is. I can just give you a warning, Corey, especially because there's no weed in Canada, that I see, I don't know, a woman I don't know, but I know that this is on Fox Business, and I see fucking Steve Forbes. I mean, Jesus Christ. Oh, and of course, this is Maria Bartiromo. So I'm guessing that this is Facebook is like a Maoist plot to suppress me from spreading rumors about Obama's family or some segment like that.
No, I initially keyed this up because of what we were talking about the article being shadow banned on Facebook algorithms, because I felt that too. I mean, look, I am terribly shrill on Facebook.
Indeed.
I just use it to be super propagandistic,
which is the way it should be used for.
Well, it's also probably like killed my engagement to some extent. But
I don't. Sorry to butt in. I don't think anybody sees my posts when I, get political on Facebook. Sorry.
But nonetheless, like this one I only got like a couple likes on it. I think one was it Corey or was somebody that thinks similarly about this stuff, and so it just had me thinking about Maria Bartiromo talking about how she was shadow banned.
Okay, let's take a look at this, and then Corey will cue. This is great. Let's go.
A clip from CNN of James Clapper basically admitting that President Obama was the one who directed all of the intelligence agencies at the end of 2016 to launch an investigation into President Trump. And I tweeted that out because there's James Clapper right on CNN telling Anderson Cooper, yes, we would not have done this had it not been for President Obama. So I tweeted out, it got no life. It got no life. And I know that's something that my followers and viewers care about big time. It got no life. So I'm just wondering, was I shadow banned?
Corey, you're a tech reporter. Was Maria Bartiromo shadow banned?
Don't call me a tech reporter.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Talked about this. I thought we talked about this. I'm kidding. No, look.
Hold on. I figured, got to figure something out for you.
Gonna go applaud Steve Jobs.
Mom, why did you do that to me?
Okay, Corey. I apologize.
That was a justified drop. I think it's just possible that nobody likes Maria Bartiromo.
Whoa. Because maybe we're finding the one thing that actually Silicon Valley is not responsible for, which is just the general lack of interest in Maria Bartiromo's nonsense on Twitter.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe they did. I mean, I guess here's the most generous thing I could say about that. Everyone should be troubled by how much power this company has to influence what we all see. Right. I mean, it still kind of blows my mind that we all see a different version of social media every day, and that only the platforms really know what's being presented to everybody else. So, I mean, things like that are legitimately concerning, but frankly, they're much more likely to be. The people more likely to fall victim to that are activists and organizers and independent media such as us, as opposed to, major corporate media broadcast personalities. I mean, it's a little bit ridiculous.
I like the way she says it, though. Like she does, and no hate on Maria Bartiromo, but people of a certain age, when they discover new terms, like I was shadow banned.
Well, we know that they.
What the fuck do you know what shadow ban
We know that they're algorithmically, crafting these things.
Yeah, of course, we know
and
that.
there's a very simple fix they could do, especially like, for instance, about this Facebook story, right? They could tell you exactly what percentage of your friends that it went to, why it was either marked up or marked down for priority in the algorithm. It could tell you those things, but that would reveal its standard. So of course, there's no way they're going to do that.
I mean. Yes,
well, getting back to the idea that Congress needs to do something about this. I mean, every user of a company like Facebook should have, by law, full access to everything the company knows about them in their system. And the reason that can happen is because it would disrupt Facebook's profit model, and because they've been so successful in lobbying that they seem to have, effectively co-opted the Senate minority leader, Chuck Schumer, which was another part of that New York Times story.
His daughter works in Facebook's marketing department.
His daughter works for Facebook, and he ran interference for them by going to Mark Warner, who was starting to investigate some of these questions and telling him to back off.
When you write an article where Mark Warner is the righteous public legislator who is attempting to rein in corporate malfeasance, and you're the other guy, that's fucking jaw-dropping. Like, this is not Chuck Schumer. All right, I don't even have to go as far as Bernie Sanders. Let's even be more middle ground here, okay? Let's take some other decent senator, all right? This isn't, I don't know, Jeff Merkley or
Wyden has been very critical.
Or Ron
of
Wyden's been
lately.
good on this stuff. Or Amy Klobuchar is somewhat decent on this stuff. This is Mark fucking Warner, one of the most corporate-oriented, right-wing, I believe actually wealthy from a cell phone company himself, guys in the Senate, a pure 90s third-way Democrat. and he's going in just on basically the Russia angle, and Schumer's like, chill out. I mean, that's awe-inspiring.
Well, what I was hearing last time I came through D.C. was that there was starting to be a revolt in the House and Senate among the Democrats because Obama had been so close to Facebook and Google and all of those Silicon Valley companies. And then, these stories about, Russia's weird memes started coming out, and Democrats found that a likely explanation for why they lost in 2016 and wanted it investigated. So here comes Schumer shutting that down. And, we've heard a lot about Pelosi's, challenges to her speakership bid, but Schumer, if anything, should be target number one, especially considering he lost seats.
Right, no doubt.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, Schumer is just the fusion of just utter, not even, I was going to say moral cowardice, but you'd have to have morals in order to have cowardice about them. I think basic, just sort of mediocre amorality with not even any good Machiavellian capacity. I mean, he is a fucking nothing.
Well, let's just look at this incident in isolation. Now, what's the right thing to do if your daughter works for a company and you're a member of Congress and you have to deal with anything involving that company? The right thing to do is to essentially recuse
tell
yourself.
Mark Warner to lean off of it because your daughter works there.
The corrupt thing to do is to carry water for that company.
Right.
And abuse your authority over your colleagues to shut down, an investigation that's not only, I still maintain that, you can't connect a lot of the Russian memeing to Clinton's loss in 2016. There's clearly a whole lot of information warfare going on right now, and it's gotten people really riled up and spun around and diluted to the extent that people haven't totally checked out. So whatever, it's a legitimate subject for inquiry.
Right.
But between that and the monopolistic practices, the data privacy issues, the illegal, frankly, human experiments that they were running without informed consent, there's 1,000 reasons that Congress should be looking at this company, that regulators should be finding ways to break it up. And instead, you've got the top Democrat in the Senate basically shutting that down personally because he is conflicted.
Right. And not to mention, obviously, the campaign contributions. We only have a couple minutes left. And I do want to say, first, before we get to this next topic, just Corey, as a tech reporter and somebody who covers Silicon Valley, is there any inspiring Steve Jobs videos or anything you'd like us to play?
Yeah, Corey, what was your favorite product reveal?
Yeah, what was your favorite product launch with Apple? Yeah. Was there any moments?
Personally, my favorite Steve Jobs product reveal was his miracle cure for cancer. I think it involved fruit juice. Too soon?
That was totally a post.
That was right on time.
No, that was right on time. That's exactly the type of thing we approve of here. You just owned him with facts and reason, with facts and logic.
Yes, Amazon sucks too, by the way.
Yeah, I was going to. That is actually, in all seriousness, I wanted to spend the last couple of minutes talking. I did the opening on Amazon. We found some horrifying clip of Jeff Bezos from the cold open. Just talk about. I feel like, okay, let me frame it like this, and then you can go wherever you want with it. I feel like the new hashtag should be nationalize Amazon, abolish Facebook.
Okay, I've heard this nationalize Amazon thing, and I support the nationalization of a lot of the internet infrastructure, including some of the software services. I'm not sure that Amazon is like a model that we would want to carry forward, even if it were under public ownership. Environmental concerns being one top reason. There's simply no excuse to send postal trucks around to deliver people things that could be procured and shipped and moved around in a much more sustainable way.
Right.
So, just based on the fossil fuel contributions alone. Also, the whole thing works. I'm not sure Amazon works as a public entity because, the whole model depends on crushing their suppliers, essentially. I mean, they operate like an extra ruthless version of Walmart. So in order for it to resemble anything like Amazon does currently, it would require, the government taking ownership of a really rotten supply chain.
Well, I mean, presumably if you nationalized it, you have all of this infrastructure and supply chains, and then you start to dismantle it, you start to devolve it to workers and to people, you start to, reshape it. But just, I guess, when I say nationalize it, I don't mean leave it as is, but put it in government hands. I just mean that here's this enormously powerful, runaway, unaccountable, detrimental, dangerous, and harmful thing, and it immediately needs to be taken into public control so that we can democratize it and do something useful with it and phase out what is harmful, basically.
Well, I'm open to that, but the devil's in the details, and I think that part of the conversation needs to be like, what do we want our cities to look like? Yeah. And in New York, you're about to get a taste of what's happened to Seattle, which is close to where I grew up, and Amazon has essentially colonized the downtown, and it's kind of like a dead zone in a lot of ways. It's really creepy and it doesn't feel good. And mail order everything really sucks the life out of the urban environment, I gotta say.
Yeah, I hate making, I don't think individual purchasing choices obviously are not a substitute for politics in any way, shape, and form, and we need to completely get away from the idea that consumption can substitute for activism and elections and so on. But I have to say, just even as and it's a fucking easy one, there is something about making a philosophical statement. And I'm not to say that I never use those services. I do occasionally. But as far as just going out, buying groceries, doing stuff like that, it's amazing that you literally can register a point now by just going to your fucking local bodega and saying, no, I'm able to walk a couple of minutes and get some fucking groceries. I don't need to shove more money and, more importantly, information into Amazon's pocket.
Yeah, and browsing a local bookshop is much nicer than browsing on Amazon.
Of course.
Even Radio Shack, which is like a big box chain store, was sort of more fun.
Dude, I happened to be by not to interrupt. I happened to be by a Barnes and Noble the other day. I have a couple of independent bookstores I do frequent, but I happened to be by a Barnes and Noble the other day, and out of convenience, I needed to grab something. I went and I bought it, and I realized, even in the span of several years, I mean, I remember back 10, 15 years ago, Barnes and Noble was part, the big box chain destroying all these great local stores, and it felt like going into Barnes and Noble felt like throwing a pebble at the Google bus.
Right.
It was amazing. It was bizarre.
I mean, it's weird what they've done to. I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is, sort of local establishments and local commerce is fundamental to a community, right? And you can't really have solidarity without having some sense of community.
Yep.
And maybe I'm overstating it, but I just think that we shouldn't. I'm not a techno-utopian, so I don't really believe in fully automated luxury communism, right?
Yeah.
I like quaint things, and in some ways, that makes me retrograde. But I think that both of these companies need to be shut down,
we
need to confiscate the wealth of the executives. I mean, the fact that Bezos gets a helipad when the subway's falling apart. And is going to displace a bunch of public housing and affordable housing units is criminal.
Yep.
And the fact that supposedly leftist Mayor Bill de Blasio is one of the main cheerleaders for this is really unsettling, because my concern now is that now that the Democrats see the appeal of leftist politics, there's going to be a huge temptation to run to the left and govern to the right, even more than they've already done.
Yes.
And, people need to be, comradeship and all that is great, but the candidates who run promising leftist and socialist solutions need to be grilled and interrogated and held accountable to the same degree as these obsolete sort of ghouls like Pelosi and Schumer.
No, I agree
because
completely,
otherwise,
and I also think that you need to. And I was saying this on Tuesday. I just think, like, on the flip side, in a positive sense, I mean, especially like where there's some momentum is, 2013, 2014, Bill de Blasio was on the map because he was literally the only national leader saying, like, we need more, food stamp coverage in New York, and inequality is a big deal. And that was enough in that totally limited, horrible political environment to stand out. And now it's like, no, we have Bernie Sanders, we have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, we have Rashida Tlaib, and Bill de Blasio still wants to be a national progressive leader. Now it should be like, well, here's a new litmus test. Nope. If you're going to give Amazon money, I mean, get the fuck out of here. No, forget it.
Yeah, I could go on a lot more about Amazon, but I know our time is coming to an end. And,
well, I think actually, Corey, you and I are going to pretty soon do an illicit history of Amazon for TMBS patrons.
That sounds fun. Let's do it.
We will do that. Corey, speaking of liking quaint things, I hope you find some weed.
It's really all I need at this point.
I could hear it. I didn't want to say anything, but I think you're absolutely right about corporate feudalism, the state of capitalism, the fundamental need to abolish Amazon and Facebook, the need for local commerce, community, and solidarity. And I think, obviously, you definitely need to take a hit on something.
Come on, Alberta.
Yeah, come on, Alberta.
I mean, some listeners are already coming through, so.
Beautiful.
I'm checking Twitter.
TMBS power.
Just
I
so
love
much
it.
power.
Solidarity is right. That's solidarity.
Our tentacles reach into every province and state.
Yeah, make an anti-Semitic poster of TMBS.
just tentacles delivering weed.
Yeah, tentacles delivering weed.
And YouTube clips.
And YouTube clips.
Peter Thiel actually backs a major weed delivery startup in San Francisco. I don't know if you knew that.
So all of a sudden I do something for Corey Pein.
You wondering why that weed tastes a bit irony?
Yeah. Corey. No, I think it would be more like, it's like there at some point it's going to be like, Corey, you and I really aren't that different. We both hate the common man. You deny it. I accept it.
I mean, it says how much THC this has, but what's the platelet count in this?
Corey, you haven't truly relaxed until you've drank blood.
There's on that note, I just want to leave your listeners with a referral to a story that I saw in the Independent today about a group of chimpanzees that overwhelmed, killed, and ate their tyrannical leader.
Sounds like another Shoutout segment.
Everybody share this article.
Yeah, everybody share this article and subtext away. Corey Pein, author of Live, Work, Work, Die. Go on Patreon immediately. Become a patron of the News from Nowhere podcast. And if you're in Alberta, for God's sake, get him some ganja. Of course, TMBS crew. Corey Pein, thank you so much. I got to go out there and visit you in Canada, man.
Yeah. We'll do a speaking tour of the frozen north.
I would love it. All right, brother. Thank you.
All right, later. Bye.
All right, folks, we got to get to the post game where we will take your calls and Discord questions. Of course, become a patron.
By the way, if you're interested in things like fascism and technology, and you're not following Corey Pein, you're several
not
mistakes.
Following fascism and technology. And another great reason to become a patron is the Silicon Valley Fascism series that Corey Pein and I did for TMBS patrons. Patreon.com/TMBS. Get your tickets to the Bell House February 1st. We're all going to be there. And follow all of us on Twitter and Instagram and everywhere else. We're here. See you in the post game. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, David. Thank you, David. Thank you to each and every one of you. Thank you to Natalie and Corey. See you on the flip side, patrons.